I have very small hands and small body, so I have to use a lot of things to able to make a lot of sounds. But yeah, when I'm on the stage, then I'm always ready. Hello, this is Mao Fujita. This is Living the Creative Life.
Well, Mao, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, especially on the day of your recital tonight here at Verbier. So I don't want to take too much of your time. But I wanted to ask about a couple of pieces on your program because I see some unusual things. First, the second piece on the program is by a composer I've never even heard of.
The Déodat de Séverac.
Okay.
Yeah, Déodat de Séverac, and he same time with the Debussy double, and he also very interested to help the very Asian culture, and also of course with the Spanish culture, and he has a friendship with the Albanese. So I'm going to play his piece, the Etude, and the very middle of this piece is the influence of Albanese. It's a very Spanish character, but on the other hand, the beginning it starts from it's very colorful. Yeah, very beautiful. It's like painting in the Monet or this sort of the 20th century of the paintings, not like Arts in Bordeaux. It's very beautiful coloring.
You were telling me about another piece that I didn't know about, the Strauss
Piano Sonata.
So what's the story there?
That was also during the COVID time. I listened so many recordings, and that was from the Grenger's recording. I also listened all of his recording, and I was very curious to listen to this because I never heard before. There are not so many people played, and this from the starts from. I thought like, why is Beethoven is here? So then I started to practice, and also everywhere this motif is coming. Always da 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 da. But I felt, of course, that this is early pieces, early works of the Richard Strauss, and also. And this also it sounds like the horn. And this came from, of course, his father, Richard Strauss' father, is the horn player and very close friend of Brahms.
Brahms, who was also obsessed with that motive.
Yes, and so the early Strauss piano pieces. I mean, also the leader is there, but there is so many influenced by the Brahms and also Beethoven.
So, did you always have super wide musical curiosity and interest and taste?
Yes. Always looking for the pieces which someone never done. The next season I'm going to play the Japanese composers, who named Akiyo Yashiro, and he's very famous in Japan. But and I'm going to, I already recorded his pieces with other 24 preludes of Chopin and Scriabin, and Akiyo Yashiro's 24 prelude. He composed this 24 prelude when he was 16 years old, during the World War II. So,
what was his style like? I don't think I've heard those preludes.
Actually, later he studied in Paris. in France. So in later piece, there's so many French, the atmosphere in his pieces. But also, when he was 16 years old, he established already as a fantastic. His composition starts like. And also some Japanese, the atmosphere there. it's very typical pentatonic, the scale, which is very, the typical Japanese pieces, Japanese songs as well, Japanese folk songs. So, yeah, it's very always interesting to listen to new discovery things.
After the intermission, we have a composer who's very close to your heart, Mozart. So how did you find this extreme closeness to Mozart? You recorded, was it all of his sonatas?
Sonatas.
Yeah, all of his sonatas.
Yes. Well, this idea came from Martin, of course, Martin. So he was the principal jury at Tchaikovsky competition in violin. But so not the piano, but after the competition we met at the reception and we talk a lot. And of course we know from the before because when I won the Haskil competition in Switzerland, Verbier, and somehow he came to the final round. Then afterwards we met in Munich in some point. Then we discussed. And he asked me what I'm doing and what is your dream, what do you want for the concert, what project do you want? And I said, in the future I really want to try the Mozart's piano sonata cycle. Then he was very excited. Then years later he gave me opportunity to play the piano sonatas, all of the Mozart piano sonatas, which was, very challenging for me. But fortunately and unfortunately, there's a COVID time, so I had a way, the concentrate on work on the Mozart's repertoire, which I have never played. Only the 2-3 sonatas, but there's 18 sonatas, so 15 sonatas left in 1 year. There's only 1 year until my concert in Verbier. But at the same time, many record company was interested on my project, and eventually the Sony Classic was huge, attention of.
Congratulations!
So we made it, the piano sonata cycle.
How about becoming comfortable with the style of Mozart? Many of our colleagues describe Mozart as the most difficult thing for them to play it naturally.
If you work on some pieces, then you have to really focus on that piece, and also you have to learn how the background of these pieces, and also how the composer, why composer wrote the pieces. So you have to be, the professor of the pieces. So I read a lot of his article, his books, and also the letters, which is very helpful to make a good interpretation. And from beginning I read, the Mozart first to the pianoforte in München. So. And he fell in love because that forte piano could make the dynamic which cannot make in the harpsichord and cembalo. So he wrote the very typical the classic style, but also influenced by Carl Emanuel Bach. This the dynamic changes he wants to express on this piano sonata. And that was, I think, when he was 70-80 years old, but he was totally fascinated by the fortepiano, so he wrote the 6th sonata at the same time, so we can recognize how he very fascinated by that.
It seems like there are a lot of rules about how to play it stylistically correctly, whatever that means, but then how do you balance that with making it feel really alive and vivacious?
Well, the one of the difficult things is how you touch the keyboard. It should be very sensitive, but also on the other hand, Mozart wrote very limited note. It's only like the 5-4-5. this is only one bar, but still in one bar there's do mi so, but do so mi so, do so mi so. Only one bar, but you have to express with this do mi so. Then, or you have to, or if you want the sing in first note do or do, then sing. Yeah, you have to think, in every single bar, and how you make the dynamic, how you sounds like, and how do you want to, think about the phrasing, and also the 3/10 sonata, the very dramatic. Also the same thing. The very first bar is. Well, so the way of thinking I learned from the Mozart pieces, and this is when you work a lot and lot and lot, then you will get it in some point, So I don't want to say this is the hint, but if you really work on that, then in some point suddenly you will notice, oh, this is the how it should be, or this can be yes, or this can be no. This is the how you progress with the Mozart repertoire.
How is that creative process when you're practicing? Is that a process of experimentation to come up with all of these different versions, so that you feel the different options and then you decide an option, or it's just happening naturally on stage?
No. I always decided my interpretation before the concert, and on the stage I only do the improvisation. Of course this is sonata form, so it should be the repetition in the development. So it's like the second time. Then of course this sonata is very special because the decampment came from the F dual. So if you want to express, emphasize this information, then so this can be possible. But yeah, before the concert I don't decide what is this ornament or this improvisation, but on the stage I feel from the atmosphere of the audiences, then I did myself in freely.
It seems like there's a lot of expectation and pressure and trying to reach for something on a very, very high level. But what I sense from you is you're always having fun.
Oh yes. We are very solo. Yeah, if you are soloist, then you have to travel by yourself. So it's always very pressure and nervous. But the piano is one of the friends, and every time we play different instrument. So this can be helpful when you discover the improvisation. Like tonight I'm going to play this is a very bright character, so this can be possible. But if you're very the hard piano, then this can be possible. Then every time I change a lot, so not the same all the time.
Okay, so then I'm thinking about I think the final piece on your program, the Kreisleriana. So can you also have fun in a piece which is so big and crazy like that, where you have a full range of the human characters, from really the passionate, emphatic, and then the really, really sensitive poetic sides?
Especially for this Kreisleriana, I have very, very the special feeling of this because I'm studying, as I said, I'm studying in Berlin with Kirill Gershwin. He's fantastic, and pianist, musician, and teacher as well. And he's good mentor for me. And when we work on some works, and he always not push me, not forced me. Then he just gave me a possibility of the vertical ways. And yeah. So I study in Hans Eisler School, which is very good school. And very next to Hans Eisler School, there's one restaurant. It's called the Rutter und Background. And this restaurant where E. Ernst Theodor Amadeus Hoffmann went always there and drank. Yes, always. Then the front of the restaurant there's the statue of E.T. Hoffmann. Then at the beginning I was like, who is this guy and why is statue here? Then the career told me that no, this is Ernst Theodor Hoffmann, Amadeus Hoffmann, and who wrote the Kreisleriana and also the Moore, how do you say in English, but I'm not sure, but Moore, like the diary, yes, and which the Schumann very fascinated with Hoffmann's the novel, and he really influenced by the main character, the Chrysler, and that's why he wrote the Kreisleriana. And this Moore books is very weird to read. I of course read, and it's hard to describe this, how terrible books is. It starts from the Moore history of the life, how he born, how he grew up, then suddenly this story is over, and other story of Chrysler came. Then some Chrysler, the story, the progressing, but suddenly the Moore comes later. Then this is like the double stories, and this is very weird to read. But how the Hoffmann knows many things about music, many things about the literature, and many things about philosophy, and also himself very enthusiastic about everything. So it's like, but the very later. But again, so this very based on this story. So if you don't read it, then you cannot get it at all. So I read, I spent almost 2 weeks. I always read very fast, but I spend 2 weeks to read it. There's also the book 1 and book 2 as well. So yes, 1 month I spent to read it, and this works are very good, and this effects very good for my playing, and also very structurally very interesting. Of course I start from, but the second film. Also in this second pieces, this sort of energetic thing, but again this beautiful theme came back. But then the third piece is this sort of the curiosity, or the suffering, and the always never stop, and especially the very beginning of piece. I don't know what key is it. There's not always tonic, always the dominant. But so this never stop, this emotional things. So this is very important for this, especially the Schumann Kreisleriana pieces.
So as I'm hearing you describe this music and playing it with such a passion, it seems to me like you're a person who has a lot of energy. Is that naturally always there, or is that when it's coming out in the music? When you're touring, how do you protect your energy so that you have it on stage, or you don't have to think about that?
Oh, I don't think about that. I didn't think any sort of things. Just go on stage and just play. So energy comes later, through the music. So yeah. Yeah, of course I travel around a lot, very lot, but yeah. I eat a lot, I sleep a lot, so yeah, energy comes from everything.
This morning I was watching and listening to a performance of yours of Rachmaninoff Third Concerto.
Oh,
So
lot of sweats, huh?
yeah. I'm thinking about one of your favorite pianists, Dino Lupati. He was once asked to play Tchaikovsky First Concerto, and he says, "Okay, give me 4 years." So how long did you allow yourself with Rachmaninoff Third so that it would be okay?
Well, every time, it's challenging. It's like Rachmaninoff, such a the grand concerto, and it's totally different from the second concerto. First concerto, it's very special always. And before I practice, I played the very difficult piano concert number 3. It has to be the lot of energy as you mentioned, and also a lot of preparation for me. And I have very small hands and small body, so I have to use the lot of things to able to make a lot of sounds. But when I'm on the stage, then I'm always ready. This is always sure that. But I worked on this Rachmaninoff Third Concerto when I was, I think, the high school student, 15, 16 years old, and at that time, of course, I have no technique at all, so it's very hard to. This is very hard for me, but after years later, every time progressing, then now I feel one of the very confident piece of my repertoire.
So, when was the last time you performed this piece? Because clearly you still have it in your fingers. When you learn something, is it always there?
Well, I'm still young, so that's why. But some point the Misha Maitsky told me, you're very, very young now, and you have to learn many, many repertoire. Otherwise, I'm now over 70 years old. It's hard to learn the new pieces, and every time you finish, then you run away. That piece is run away, fly away, immediately. So but when he learned many, many times ago, like when he was 20 years old, then still remember how the position of the fingers.
So, and finally, speaking about the young people,
yes.
what advice would you give if a young person came to you and said, "I really love the music very much, but I find that it's difficult to be on stage in front of the audience"?
Yeah, I think the nervous came from, you practice not enough, I think. And if you prepare that 100%, then on the stage, of course, it has the nervous and very unstable situation. So, but if you prepare 100%, then it goes to like 75, 80% in the low. But so if you prefer 100%, it's okay. If you prefer 120%, it will be fantastic. Like tonight, my concerts, it will be very great.
That reminds me of my favorite quote of Martha Argerich. Yeah. She's always practicing so much, and she says, I'm losing 100% of my ability on the stage. That's why I have to prepare 200%.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah. But pretend is also very important, If you show you're nervous and I'm not ready, then the people will notice immediately. But pretend like I'm very ready. If you are not ready, but if you pretend like ready, then the people will, of course, there are some of the people notice, but not all of the audiences are unhappy,
Well, thank you so much for sharing your music, your enthusiasm for life and music. And I'm looking forward to hearing this music tonight. Yes. And I'm wishing you much more joy in your life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes.